Hello and welcome to the Hugh Hatrick Show with a very special guest tonight. It is Max Grime from SimStaff. Welcome to the show, Max.
Hello, Hugh. Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for having me. I'm looking forward to it.
Yes. Now, it's normally we have like specialist sim racers who might create content on YouTube, but tonight we've got a person here, you and Max, who actually puts together great sim racing events. So we're very excited to hear all the kind of events that you've been working on, and how you got started, and what's maybe coming in the future. And for budding kind of sim racers or people who like to get into the sim industry, perhaps you could give us some advice as to how to do that, and things like that. So tell me, what's been the highlight of the last 12 months for you?
Yeah, so obviously we had a lot of events at SimStaff. So we run events. We do a lot of staffing for things across the country, and indeed the world. But yeah, the last 12 months has been a pretty special one for us. We grew a lot as a business. Sort of one of the main ones we had, which people may have seen, is we did a project with BBC Children in Need, which was called Game On, where basically we had two racing simulators, two F1 sims that went up and down the country. So we started at Silverstone, then we went to Goodwood, and then we went to a few different other events. So we went to Carfest as well. And then after that, we went on a tour of some shopping centres basically around the country. All of this was to sort of raise awareness for children in need in general, as well as raise a bit of money and all that sort of stuff. So part of what Children in Need wanted to do this year or last year, and I think continuing into this year, is they wanted to attract younger people again. Because I know for me, when I was growing up, I'd always watch Children in Need with my parents and things like that.
Yeah.
But with the rise of Netflix and digital media and all this sort of stuff, I think they've lost that a little bit. So they wanted to attract a younger audience by doing more gaming. So they did one of the aspects of it, which we did, was the Formula One racing sims. So we set up a sim and we basically said to people, sign up and you could be in with a chance to be on the live show that they did for Children in Need on the BBC at the end of the year.
And that's huge. That's a massive show.
Yeah, exactly. So loads of people, whenever we said, "Oh, do you want to have a go?" and people sort of like, "Oh, I don't know," and we said, "Oh, you could be on TV," and they're like, "Okay, then I'll give it a shot." And the way they did it was quite good as well, because they did the top 50 times would go through to a draw, and then two people would be drawn from that, which I thought was quite a positive way of doing it, because it basically meant that you didn't just show up and you went, "Oh, because we had some of the esports guys come along and their times were we took their times off, but people would come in and see like a 24 or something ridiculous. And people were like, there's no way I'm beating that. So we said, no, it's the top 50. So if you get into that, then you go into a draw. And then you go on to, like we said, national television. It was a really cool project to work on. And got to see Pudsey quite a few times, which was pretty cool. And raise a lot of money for the charity, which was always good.
Yeah. And do you find that there's quite a lot of demand, as more people find out about racing games and things, to put on these kind of sim events around the country? What's been like the areas that you think that, or new kind of events that you've done that are trying to attract young people? Like, do you go into schools, or do you find out about? I know that Josh, I think he had done an event for his old school a while ago, a few years ago. So what do you find is quite a kind of new market for sim racing events?
Yeah, so it's become more mainstream through obviously the pandemic. This is when all of this boomed. I'm sure we're all aware of that. But people started going, oh, actually, why don't we? This is pretty fun, and we can just do it pretty readily available at the school or things like that. So, like you say, so we did a project with Strathallan School up in Scotland, where. So that it's a boarding school, and they said, we want 4 simulators to have just for the kids to use when they're not at school, primarily sort of in their social time, but also it can be used as an educational tool. And then this sort of that led into quite nicely a project that we'll be running. That was I know that Williams F1 have been talking about at the BET conference that's just happened, which is the Student Racing League.
All right.
which is a collection of, at the minute, I think it's just 10 schools, but they're looking to grow it over time. And it's basically a league for colleges and school kids to basically come in and race against one another and see who's the quickest. And, I think things like, you look at the rise of YouTube, the job that I'm in myself, things like this podcast, is that you can make a career out of this kind of stuff. So people in schools and educators are starting to go, well, hang on, we can look to esports to develop quite a lot of different techniques and things like that. So we worked as well with a school called Burnley College up in obviously Burnley, and they've got an esports course where they teach all sorts of stuff from sort of media and video editing to marketing. I believe there's even a finance aspect in there for it. So there's all sorts that you can do off the back of esports and sim racing. And I think a lot of people are sort of waking up to that. And that's when, they contact someone like us and say, hey, we want to sort of announce this event, bring a sim down, talk to the kids. And it's an inspiring thing to do, because you can go, it's a bit like being in an F1 car, and who doesn't want to be in an F1 car? Yeah,
exactly. No, it does sound really good. I mean, putting on these events and also exposing young people to motorsport, isn't it? Because a lot of the time this is the best way, or probably the most straightforward way, to try and get into motorsport. Now that more people are racing on games, and then in turn, if they enter competitions, they can go quite far. And we've seen people now get from just doing it in their spare time to all of a sudden, if they go far enough and they're good enough, they get a chance to actually drive in a real competitive motorsport arena. And do you think that as well, that will continue to grow as more people kind of get on board?
Yeah, absolutely. So, for example, one of the kids at Strathallan, after we installed the Sims, he went to that school because of the Sims, because of his racing background. And that's, that automatically was good for the school, because obviously they get an extra student. But it's also good for the student because it gives them a chance to practice those things. And I think with the growing cost of junior racing in general, that's when you start to bring in, if you can replicate real world racing on the sim as much as possible, a sim might cost, we're talking a top quality sim, sort of 3, 4, 5 grand. Compare that to sort of a track day, which will cost you, $2 grand a day. So it gives you a good chance. And I think it was, I think it's a couple of the NASCAR drivers. It might even be William Byron and Chase Elliott. It might just be Byron. I can't remember off the top of my head, but they started their career through iRacing. So they were getting on the sim at home, showing what they could do, rather than taking sort of the traditional route up through the ladder. And you see, quick guys like, obviously James Baldwin has had a decent sort of stint in GT3s. And then you've got a few of the other F1 esports guys that have given it a go. And, they've pretty much always been competitive. So I think people are seeing it as more of a legitimate route towards racing and that connection to real world motorsport, which is, for me, that's really cool, because ultimately I'm a motorsport fan.
I think it's a great way to connect people again, because I think motorsport is, as everything goes up in cost, motorsport has gone up in cost. Even just trying to get to a race costs quite a bit of money, even as a spectator. So to be able, I think this is the great thing that with simulators, it is the connection, where you can have a go and be in it. I mean, I know so many people who absolutely love ACC. They'll play Assetto Corsa Competizione every week, for 2-3 nights a week, and it's become their life. It's become their kind of their big hobby, and they just really enjoy it. So it is a great thing, and I think you can learn so much, especially with setups and race strategy, all these kind of things. I think it's a wonderful opening to be able to do that. But how did you ever think when you were at school that you would end up in this kind of sim racing motorsport environment?
I think not at all. When I was at school, it wasn't a thing. There were YouTubers, and that was sort of the closest thing to working in this kind of industry that I think there was. It was like, I want to be a YouTuber. Everyone wants to be a YouTuber, because you just, what you saw on the internet was they're going out, they're doing really cool stuff, and I want to do that. And then it wasn't until when I was at university that, obviously we had the lockdown, and I was part of my motorsport society, and which we didn't really know what to do, and we started doing this sort of sim racing stuff.
Yeah.
And that's sort of where it's developed from here, from
Yeah.
there. Sorry. And so I was part of an organisation called British University Sim Racing.
All right.
We set that up with a few of my friends, which is what led me to this job.
Yeah.
But I know quite a few of the guys from there who have then gone on to do engineering roles, first in an esports setting, and then in a, for some of the F1 teams, some of the GT teams, things like that. So it's definitely a way in that hasn't necessarily existed before. And for me, that's really cool.
Yeah. And what is it like working for Josh and that? We always got on extremely well, but he seems like a lovely guy. I've known him now for a good few years. He seems like a very switched on. And is he always coming up with new ideas for new events and things? Is it very much kind of, what are the meetings like when you're a member of SimStaff?
Yeah, so I've worked with Josh for nearly 3 years now, I think. So I started working with him at SimGrid, which was brief. I was briefly there, sort of in a marketing role with him. So we had sort of quite a lot of back and forth, helping him with sort of pitch decks and things like that, talking to potential partners at SimGrid. And then both myself and the company, we sort of went in slightly separate directions. But Josh was about that time setting up what is now SimStaff. Yeah. And he was like, do you want to come on board? And I was like, of course I do. Because, he was saying things like you can go and work with an F1 team and you can work at Grand Prix and stuff like that. Yeah. And it sort of developed from there a little bit, me and Josh working together. I think we're quite a good pairing because he's sort of very steadfast. If he has an idea, he absolutely runs with it. And sometimes I go, okay, that's a great idea. Let's see, the practicalities of it. And then let's look at sort of the arguments that are going to come towards us before they happen, and we can work them out as well. So yeah, he's very quick paced. He's got his eye on the ball. I always joke with him that he's sort of the super networker. Like you say, he sort of knows anyone and everyone. But he's a good person to work for. Quite laid back, but also knows exactly what he's doing. So I've got full confidence in him. If he's attached to it, then I'm confident that it will do well in the industry. So that's why, when he said, do you want to come on board full time? It was, it turns out that it sort of wasn't a risk, but at the time I had a full-time job with a reasonably large company. I was working with BMW. So, but I sort of wasn't loving it. I really wanted to do the sim stuff full time. And when Josh sort of gave me the call and said, do you want to come and work full time? Like I said, it in theory or written down on paper, it was a risk, but I was like, I've got confidence in this guy. I've got confidence in the company. That's how it's sort of developed over the last sort of 8 months or so, which is, I'm happy that I've done it now. And now we're sort of in the flow of things. It definitely feels right.
Yeah, absolutely. And so what do you think are going to be the next steps for sim racing, especially for sim racing events? Because I suppose if you're trying to do a general public type event, you don't want things to be too complicated. You need to have sims that people can basically jump on and have a go. But do you think there's going to be kind of advances to make that experience even better? Well, what do you think is going to maybe enhance the offerings that you have so far?
I think the main next step for sim racing would be sort of trying to get people more engaged in watching it like a real sport. Yeah. Because sim racing's in a weird sort of place where sometimes it tries to be an e-sport, sometimes it tries to be like motorsport, but virtual. Yeah. And I think that can work very strongly to its advantage. Again, like sort of if we look back to the lockdowns, I remember my parents, who have no interest in video games whatsoever, but they were watching things like do you remember the IndyCar series that they did?
Oh, yes. Yeah. That's right, online, yeah.
Yeah, and it was broadcast on Sky and stuff like that. And I think a lot of people looked at that and they enjoyed it because of the personalities that were involved in it. Yeah. And I think for me, that's the next step in how to sort of properly connect to the audience and stuff. We can ship simulators out to all of these things all the time, and people hop on and enjoy them. But we want to see people really connect with the personalities in sim racing. And one piece of sort of media that for me like really sort of pushed that to the next level is we worked with on ESL R1, so the Rensport series.
All right.
So we did some of the stewarding as well as some of the technical support on site for the finals. But when they did the finals out in Sweden in I think it was November, they had a piece with who was it? I think it was Marcel Sinsic. And basically they went, to his house. They spoke to him about his journey in sim racing and things like that. And for me, most of the time, because I'm working on them, I don't have time to sort of watch a lot of the sports events that we're working on, but I sort of dip in and out. But we had a bit of downtime and that was up on the big screen. And for me, I was like just watching that the whole time. That was really cool. For me, that was like the next step that I think we need to take in the industry into sort of doing that kind of media a bit more like the traditional motorsports kind of media as opposed to the esports kind of side. But that stuff was really cool. And I think if we can hit that nail on the head, then people will start to not just see sim racing as, I can nearly do motorsport, but, I want to be like, Marcel Sinsic, your Danny Berejne, your James Baldwin's. Like, I want to be like them. And, then you can see where it takes you, whether it's into motorsport or just into esports. I think that's the next step for us.
Yeah, I think that's the thing, isn't it? It's got to be professional. I think if it's as professional as possible, I think it commands more respect. I think that was the thing, because when they did the F1 esports during lockdown, it was a bit of a joke in places where they didn't even have damage on, and cars were flying all over the track, and it looked. I remember watching it with my mates, and I thought, this is not good for Formula One, because it was just more of it looked really badly. Like they had good commentators and special guest driving, but I thought they should have thought about it a little bit more, made stricter rules and I think stricter settings so that the races would be a lot more competitive and kind of more realistic. Because they've got great people. When you look at things like the Sky TV, you've got Crofty and Brundle. They do a really good job of introducing races and all the kind of build up. I think that's kind of what they need to do in esports. I think they do a bit of that, to be fair, with the Gran Turismo events, because they're always pretty well run, and it must be very exciting. I thought one of these days I'm going to get to the live events. I'd like to try and go and see one of those, because they do look great fun. I love the way they've got this big studio, and then you've got all the racers all in next to each other. I think that's a really quite exciting way of doing it, and then they have to change over in between to take over and do a race. But no, it's quite a thing. So what would you? For budding sim racers, what would you recommend? What games and kind of what games do you think are the best ones to kind of get into to help people improve their kind of sim racing experience?
I think you can start with a lot of different sort of pathways. The Gran Turismo series is always quite a good one, particularly if you're just starting out, because it's slightly more arcadey, but you've still got the simulator aspects, and you've also got I know they have a lot of competitive stuff. So if you do want to get into it and dip your toe in, then you can go, I've done quite good in these open lobbies. Let me try and give this sort of competition thing a go. That's really well supported. Obviously on PC, you've got ACC is probably the biggest sort of, I'd say, entry level platform. That's the one that I sort of started on. So I joined British University Sim Racing BUSR doing ACC, and that's sort of where it's snowballed from there. Because what usually happens is you start on ACC, you drive around the GT3s, because they're quite easy to get to grips with. You've got, there's none of this, if I turn off ABS and traction control, then I'll be a second faster. They're built into the cars. So you can sort of get used to that other techniques. So things like racing lines, setups, that kind of stuff. And then from there, you can go into, it then starts to get a lot more expensive, but things like iRacing, where, that it's purely built on competition. Like there is no, unless you may be doing an open, like an open server or something with your friends. There's not really a fun side of iRacing other than unless you like to see the competitive side.
I remember doing lobbies in iRacing. I wouldn't have always called it fun, to be fair. It was it could be more like a wreck fest. when you're in those little single seaters and things. But yeah, private lobbies definitely were better.
Absolutely, and yeah, you can just have a fun mess around with your mates, and it is good fun. Like they do the unranked series and stuff like that. But if you really want to start taking competitive stuff seriously, iRacing is definitely the platform, I'd say, at the minute. We'll see what happens with Rennsport. Obviously, that's not released to the public yet, but in doing the stuff with ESL, we've had a chance to give it a go, and it does seem fun. And I think they are tackling the esports in the right way with things. So like the app is a really good companion they've got. Where you can collect like things like driver cards and stuff like that. And that's, to me, that's really cool. And part of sort of what I was saying earlier about making it more of an event. So I'm hoping they have a positive year. I know they had a bit of a rocky one at the end, particularly in the second half of last year. But for me, it's only a good thing if we have more sort of simulators on that level that are available.
Yeah. Because Rennsport, there was a lot of news about Rennsport at the end of last year, wasn't it? Or in terms of they made it was almost like they really improved their platform. It was like a huge overhaul, basically, of what they were doing and trying to get out there. So I take it, it's like a sim racing platform that eventually people will be able to play on, in effect, or take part in.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's a combination of, it's got a bit of iRacing, a bit of ACC, a bit of Race Room. So a lot of different sims are kind of coming together to form what Rennsport is. I think they want to mainly focus on sort of the esports side. So in that way, it's more closely linked to iRacing. But I think it's slightly more accessible. But I don't know what their plans are for the full release. But it is something that, I want to watch closely. Like I say, I think it's been in development for a long time. They've got a lot of the esports guys on board, which I think will help it. But it's something that I think will be a good thing when it comes out, which is hopefully this year. But I'm not sure on that one, unfortunately.
Yeah. So tell me, when you've been doing these events, have you been able to rub shoulders with some of the famous kind of motorsport people and racing drivers? Who's been the kind of most well-known racing driver that you've met while you've been doing these kind of events?
So we work quite closely with Jordan King. So former IndyCar and Formula 2 driver, an Alpine test driver. So that was really cool. We did sort of a filming day with him, and he brought in, he had a trophy from when he did ELMS, as well as his sort of IndyCar qualifying ring and stuff. For me, that was really cool because I'm a big IndyCar fan, especially the Indy 500. So to sort of hear the stories from him and stuff was really cool. So I first met Jordan a few years ago when we did F1 esports stewarding together. So he was sort of the race driver representative. So we worked quite closely with him and got to know him quite well. So that's always really cool, like hearing sort of real life stories from those guys. And then you're in the same circles as quite a lot. Well, see all the drivers. You can sometimes, usually after a season is finished, sort of have a beer with them or something like that. But most of the time, because a lot of the time I'm at these events, I'm part of the adjudication team in some sort of way. I almost try to avoid it because I don't want to
get distracted
or anything like that. Exactly. Because even though we're all extremely professional in what we do, I want to try and avoid any bias whatsoever.
No, that's it. It'd be too easy for it to be seen as that. That's the thing,
I just refer to the drivers like screen 1, screen 2, screen 3, and then at the end of the season, like I'll bump into them in the pub or something afterwards, and it's like, what's your name again? Oh yeah,
as long as they're not chasing you down saying, "Oh, your decision was dreadful," robbed me of a victory. But
never had that, thankfully. We had actually one series a couple of years ago in a different series that we were doing, where we thought the team were going to be like fuming with us because we'd given their driver a penalty. It was deserved as far as we were concerned, because they took another driver out, but they weren't very happy with us at the time. But then afterwards they were like, "Oh, can we buy you a drink?" And we were like, all right then. What are you going to put in it? But
get somebody else to taste it first. Yeah, absolutely.
That's the thing. We can all park it after the competition. It's not just the drivers and the teams like with one another that sort of hug and make up at the end of the season. It's we've had a fair few battles in voice chats with some of the drivers and the team managers, but at the end of the season, we're all doing the same thing together, and it's just a nice thing to be a part of.
Yeah. It's amazing how you see the kind of motorsport kind of environment expand, isn't it? Because you've got your real kind of your big events that obviously people go and travel to a company like the Blancpain Championship or whatever it might be, a GT3 or something. And then you've got these huge esport events. And I remember speaking to Josh a while ago, and I think it was at Monza. I think it was for either the Blancpain Championship, but they had a whole simulator event set up at the actual race. So people who were watching it could come along and I think it was a specified people who were actually taking part, but they may have had times as well where I think other people would come in and have a go, and it looked amazing because I think it was actually in the pit lane, because I don't think they were using all the pits, and so they'd made this site for them, and it looked amazing because I think that's the best thing you can do, because if you're waiting in between races at a big event like that, you've got a bit of time, and then you're actually able to go along and get into a sim rig. I mean, that just makes you day, because you're able to have a go and kind of and pretend that you're actually in it. You know, it adds to the experience. Do you think that's going to be a bigger part of motorsport events as things go on?
Yeah, I think it's growing. You know, each time I've been to events over the years, so I've been to quite a few at Brands Hatch over the years from varying sizes. And it sort of started. I think I went to the DTM in 2013 was the first race that I'd been to, and there were some simulators there, but they were like at Brands Hatch. They were in sort of a separate room that they have at the circuit, which I know they run sort of on basically constantly. But there was no one really had like a sim or anything like that. You fast forward to like Goodwood, for example, this year, and we had 6 simulators there. We were with EA in the F1 game. But like you walked around the sort of paddock area, or not the paddock area, like the where they've got like the stands.
Oh yeah.
Sort of,
it's a great event. Yeah,
like so you've got Hyundai, BMW, Ford, all of the manufacturers there, and I would say probably 70% of them had some form of simulator there. Whether it be a sim or some of them had like pit stop challenges. I think Pirelli had like a pit stop challenge thing. But I think they're starting to realize that these events, people don't just want to walk around and look at stuff. They want to give something a go. And it's quite expensive to put some random in a Ford GT, but you can sort of let them feel that, get the feeling of being behind the wheel of one of these things, in one of these simulators. And then, what will happen there is, you could have someone go, do you know what? I really enjoyed that experience. I might buy a Ford car, for example, which is, it does sound like a stretch, but it's those sort of experiences that matter. And I think people are starting to value a bit more, like from a marketing perspective. So rather than your sort of hard and fast, we've paid for this advertisement in a newspaper and we've got 15 people from it or something like that. Now you're getting people who, they walk into a showroom, they go, I gave this a go at Goodwood. I want to try out one of the real cars. And you also get the effect of like social media and stuff like that. Everyone wants to, there's a sort of a, what's it called? Like the social media economy almost of, I've had an experience, let me post it on Instagram. And then people go, oh, that's kind of cool. I want to go and do that. That seems like a fun brand. You're seeing more and more of these brands like bring these sims along. And obviously for us, that's a positive. But it also gets more people interested in the sort of industry and stuff. I wouldn't be interested in sim racing and sort of I wouldn't have a wheel if I couldn't try it at one of these events. So I think the first time I tried it was, like I said, at that DTM 2013 event. First time I raced with a wheel, and I was like, do you know what? I want a wheel at home. So I went home, bought one, and now we're here down a slightly expensive bunny pit, but it's got me a job. So
it doesn't get any cheaper, does it? That's the thing. It's always there's always something new that
definitely paid for itself in the long run. But I think it's a useful marketing tool that a lot of people are starting to realize, particularly in the last sort of 12, 24 months.
Yeah, yeah. I remember that I was in. We went to Goodwood a few times, and I think the last time was 2018, and BMW had simulators there, and I think it was like BMW M2s or something similar like that,
Mhm.
and you had to race around Silverstone, and they had about 4 of them. They were quite basic setups, but it was quite fun though, because it was at least the cars that represented the stand, you know. So you had to drive along, and you had to get a really good time, but you had to drive through all the traffic. As well, so it was quite tricky. But no, there were lots of good fans, and Gran Turismo. I'm sure they had Gran Turismo simulators there as well that you could have a go on. And I remember Mercedes, they had a race simulator. So no, it is pretty good, and it does because when people want to go to things like that, they do want to have an experience. So if you can actually have a race and have a go, you feel so much better. But I remember the early times. I think it must have been 2013 or 2014. I'm sure Race Room. They had a kind of mobile unit that had all the race simulators. They had a motion one, and then they had standard ones, and you could have a go for a $5 or something and take part in an event. So it's really good. So you must be quite positive about the future then, for your environment and for kind of esports. Because for people watching who might be interested in joining, SimStaff or looking what would they do if they were interested in taking part in more sim racing or putting on events? What would they do to get in touch with you?
Yeah, so we're always looking for new people. One of the things that we've sort of based the company off of the whole time is that we want it to be run by sim racers. You can get anyone to be a technician, but you can't necessarily get them to be a simulator technician. And obviously that one, you get a better knowledge base for specific hardware. So things like obviously Fanatec, Thrustmaster, even Logitech, things like that. These guys will know the software inside out because they have it at home, for example. But also you're more passionate about the product, and that comes across in the event delivery. So one of the things we pride ourselves on is, our guys become like an ambassador for your brand. So they're not just, blokes who are there or girls who are there who are running a sim. They're there to sort of push your products and, give people that experience that we were just talking about. So we're always looking for people who are, passionate about sim racing, just enjoy it as a hobby kind of thing. And then, you can contact us. So you can either contact me on LinkedIn, or we've got an email, so you can email support@simstaff.net. Basically just send your CV, maybe a little cover letter saying, this is the kind of stuff I've done before, this is what I'm interested in, because we want to hear stories about why you enjoy sim racing and stuff like that, because a lot of the reason why I like the way we do how we run our company is we give people a chance that wouldn't necessarily have it like normally. Because you look at your traditional jobs, let's say it mirrors, we'll use a motorsport example, it's a bit extreme, but if a team is hiring for a mechanic, they're like, you need to have X amount of years experience, you need to have this degree, you need to have this qualification, blah blah blah. Whereas like for us, we'll go, you might not have those qualifications, but we can take you on board, you can learn. So this year we're planning on doing a lot more training with our guys, so taking them to some of our partners, so giving them an experience, and then they can sort of push that on to our clients, customers and things like that. So we want to hear people's passion, basically. Because if you're passionate about something, you'll be good at it. You might not be good at it yet, but you definitely will be. That's really important for us.
Yeah, no, that's the thing. I always remember listening to Murray Walker, the great commentator, and he always says, if you don't, he could never do motor racing himself, but if you couldn't do it, he said you talked about it, and kind of which was the understatement of the year, because he was such a good commentator, wasn't it? Because his passion was the thing that came out overall, wasn't it? You could, any kind of motorsport he would talk about, and that's the kind of thing that does set aside. I think if you when you watch motorsport, you want good commentators, isn't it? It's the whole atmosphere, all of that, and that passion is behind every aspect of the sport, isn't it? From every engineer to the racing driver himself. That's why they do it, because they enjoy doing it. But no, it's a fantastic thing. I have to say, I was at the Autosport show last weekend, and it was quite interesting to try the different sim rigs that were available. We had the F1 style. I tried one called Race Sim, which is a UK-based one that they build it themselves. I think it's in London, and it was incredibly solid, and it made me laugh because when I got home on the Saturday night, I went back onto my play seat here, my kind of the challenge which I've had for about 7 years, and then I have got my Logitech steering wheel with 923, which is not a bad setup. It's okay, but when you brake really hard, because it's got there's no rigidity to it. I thought the steering wheel was going to come off. It was just like, it kind of rises up and that. So it is quite a thing. So these rigs are so good now. When you do a proper one, isn't it? It makes such a difference. It really, and some of them have motion. And the one I played on actually had a little bit of motion, not too much, and it did add a huge amount to the experience. Do you think actually there's a question for you? Do you think motion rigs work? Because some of them are very extreme, and then some of them are quite light. What do you think? What's your take on that?
I think as an experience, they're cool, and you do get sort of immersed a little bit more into it. Yeah. In terms of like actual, if you're using the sim for, let's say, practical purposes, like you're trying to take sim racing seriously and competitively and stuff like that, it wouldn't be the first thing I'd advise. But that's based off my opinion. I don't particularly enjoy the motion. It's kind of cool. I've been to F1 Arcade a couple of times, and they've got their cool sort of motion rigs, and it's a really cool experience. But it wouldn't necessarily be my first pick when I'm, I'd rather get a better wheelbase and pedals than an extra sort of motion set. But if you want to go for it and you've got the budget, then there's no reason why you can't certainly give it a go. Just 'cause it's not for me doesn't mean it's not for everyone. So that's my sort of take, I guess, on motion. But
I have to say I was quite impressed with this simulator, only because it wasn't that much of a motion. It was quite, they didn't put too much into it, so you weren't at kind of extreme angles. And I thought that made it quite nice. It was it did make it more immersive. I imagine if you had that with a VR headset, it would be really quite interesting. Because I find that a lot of the motion kind of rigs, they're so extreme that you're kind of, you're at an angle you would never be in a car because you're strapped in. So it's just kind of a bit ridiculous, But no, it's interesting to see how the technology is going forward. And do you think you'll be doing more kind of shows like the Children in Need this year? Is that on the books to try and do it again, or what do you think might happen there?
Yeah, so we're always planning to do sort of similar things again. We want to continue the partnerships that we've obviously built over the last year or so. Hopefully we're looking to do something similar with people like BBC and EA and stuff like that at Goodwood and other events. Nothing sort of solid at the minute. One thing that's really cool though is that we're going to be very much involved with the Sim Racing Expo at the end of the year.
So I'd love to go to that.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Also, you're talking about the motion just there, is that I'd always encourage people to go out and try this sim equipment if you can. So things like the Sim Racing Expo, some stuff at Autosport. But basically, if you see a sim, give it a go, and then you'll sort of know what you need to buy. But yeah, the time with the Sim Racing Expo is we're basically providing the technical support for it. So if you're an exhibitor or you're looking to be an exhibitor at the Sim Racing Expo, and you think, it's a great event to get my business out there and, do some networking and things like that. But there's a lot of logistics and stuff involved, particularly with the setup of the sim at the venue. Basically, we're offering a package with the Sim Racing Expo that you can book our staff, and we'll come in, we'll set up the sim, we'll be on site throughout the event. So if you do have any issues, then we can fix that. So it's basically to try and stop, each individual vendor having, one technician each. We'll sort of have like one technician for 5. Most of the time things don't go wrong, but when they do, you do need someone who knows what they're doing.
Yeah, exactly.
That's obviously what we pride ourselves on. So it's a really cool time that we've done with Sim Racing Expo. That means that we can offer this support to vendors and exhibitors alike. So that's something to be looking forward to at the end of the year.
Is that in Germany? I think they do it. Yeah.
It's in. I think it's in Dortmund.
I was looking on the internet because I was trying to get there last year, but I'd definitely like to go. I think is it October time October,
Yeah,
November time.
October, November. I can't remember off the top of my head. 'Cause
Yeah.
it's quite far down the line at the minute.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think
Yeah.
it's definitely something I'd recommend going to, especially if you want to try out a different sim kit, because
Yeah.
all of the sort of, not even just all the major guys are there, but some of the slightly smaller up and coming ones.
Yeah.
So we do quite a lot of work with Acetec, for example.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So, you know, you go to most of these venues and people are using Fanatec, Thrustmaster, Logitech. So you don't get a chance to try, these slightly smaller brands like sort of Simicube, Cube Controls, Acetec kind of guys. So it gives you a perfect chance to sort of give it a go, and you might go, actually, I quite like that wheel. I might save up for it, or that'll be the one I go for. So.
Oh well, yeah. No, that sounds great. I have to say, obviously we can get to Goodwood this year. I've not been for a long time, and I'd love to go. And it's such a good event. And as you say, there's more simulators now than ever, and also to see the cars on the track going up the hill is always great fun. I once was able to drive up the hill. One of the years I was there, because it was Infinity. I had gone to the Infinity garage, and they were offering you a chance to go up the Goodwood Hill if you went on the Thursday it was like at that time they had the manufacturer's mile or something, or you could, it was on a Thursday, and then you could go into this shed where they had all the cars, the manufacturers, and then you just jumped in, you booked a time, it was completely free, and one of the guys went with you, and off you went up the hill, and all they did was add in a few extra chicanes so that you didn't think you were Max Verstappen heading up there, as fast as you could. But it was great because you actually got the full hill all the way up, and then you came down a different road. But it's a very special event. I think if you could get a chance to get there, it's one of the best events in the world for motorsport. But no, it's been an absolute pleasure to be able to chat with you, Max. I think that's over 40 minutes, so I won't keep you too long there. But we've had I think we've explored many of the topics of sim racing and also how people can get involved. And it's great to see. It's just so good that Britain again and you guys are able to do so much in the field and make such an impact and get people out there racing, because I think it's a great sport. I think there's huge growth potential in sim racing and motorsport, and you guys are giving it a really good professional face, which is great. People look at your events and think, yeah, that's the way they need to do it. So that's the thing. So you never know. For people watching, you could be, if ever you go to a big simulator event, it could be one of Max's events that goes on along with Josh and the others who all work for SimStaff. But it's an absolute pleasure to be with you. I'm sure you'll be very excited about the future and how things are going. But stay on the line as I close the show. But to everyone watching, you'll be watching the Hugh Hatrick Show with Max Grime from SimStaff. So now you know what it takes to be a great simulator engineer and a coordinator for a big company like SimStaff. And I wish them all the best. They've done a great job so far, and I'm sure they'll do very well into the future. We'll be back on Tuesday with our race. It will be our weekly stream, and then in a week's time as well, we've got our time trial. But from us both here, you've been watching the Hugh Hatrick Show, and our famous phrase is drive fast, but drive your bus even faster. Take care, everyone. Bye just now.